G'day everyone, welcome to another edition of the F1 Armchair Experts Notebook.
It's not the
I'm
notebook.
here with my...
It's not the notebook.
Okay, cut that. It's not the Notebook. It's the F1 Armchair Experts Podcast. I'm here with my partner in crime who I like to spend a little time, Big T. And I'm proud to introduce our first guest, my favourite son, eldest son, Sammy. Welcome to the podcast, mate. So, T, let's get on with the intro. So, Big T, Sammy, one of the big topics at the moment is obviously there was a lot of discussion last season about Aramco coming in as a major title sponsor for F1. Now, Aston Martin have picked them up as a principal sponsor, and it's not exactly like Lawrence Stroll needs any coin to back his team up. What do you guys think about the bloke who's worth $1 gazillion getting a major oil company behind him? Sammy, I'll throw to you as a guest.
I'm not sure. Look, I don't know how well his investment's done so far in his many years in the sport, but I feel like he's getting a bit scary now for him. So he's trying to get as many people in to support him as he can now. I think that's the move, is just a bit more support than he was getting before, I guess.
Big T, your thoughts? Hot topic, quick thoughts.
Aramco was a major sponsor of Formula One. Like, their branding was all the way around the track. So what happens now? Is it still going to be trackside and on the Aston Martin, or is it only going to be on the Aston Martin, and Formula One now have to find another trackside sponsor, or like, how does it work? Does anyone know?
Do you know what's happened before? What have they usually done with it?
I honestly don't know.
Good points. I mean, Aramco did sponsor the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, but then you look back years ago when Marlboro or Philip Morris as the cigarette brand sponsored McLaren, it was always the Marlboro Grand Prix, blah, 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 but still McLaren turned up with the full Marlboro livery. So I think, in short, it's Aramco is going to sponsor Aston Martin as one team, and they're going to keep sponsoring the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and that may be the end of it.
It's some mouthful, isn't it? It's some mouthful now, isn't it? It's actually now going to be called the Aston Martin Aramco Cognizant Formula One team. That's a bit of a mouthful, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can look at it, guys like Petronas when they sponsor Mercedes. So when it was the Malaysian Grand Prix, it was always Petronas Malaysian Grand Prix.
Mm. And they still had the... Yeah, I guess so.
Yep.
Just keep it that way.
Second hot topic, Honda have announced that they're going to stick around for the next couple of years as a effective naming partner for Red Bull Racing. What's your thoughts on that? Big T, I'll throw to you on this one.
I'm confused as to what the actual news is, because I mean Honda. So basically, for our listeners, Honda came back into the sport. They developed up this engine. They've spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of euros, dollars, whatever you want to call it, getting in with the McLaren first. That didn't work out. Then they switched to AlphaTauri. They kind of brought it on, and then obviously Red Bull took it on from there. Now then they announced that they were leaving again by Honda, but they were going to move all their design of their engine would be going to Red Bull, and Red Bull were going to brand it as their own engine. But underneath it all, it would still be Honda technicians, Honda engineers. It is a Honda design, and it would be headed up by Honda people that were based in Milton Keynes the whole time. So I'm struggling to understand what the actual news is So it's actually going to remain branded as a Honda, and it's.
I think you're right. It's going to keep the Honda branding on it. It's not going to be a pseudo Tag Heuer come, whatever you want to call it, donk.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually going to have the 5-letter word Honda written on it.
Well, I think it's got to do with where the money's going. So, would Red Bull, before this announcement, would Red Bull have been paying those engineers, paying for the engine and things like that? I feel like now the news is Honda is still paying that money to keep their name in the sport, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, good call. Tony, your final thoughts?
Have they announced where this engine is going to be produced? Is it going to continue to be produced in the Red Bull, this new Red Bull engine facility that they were building, or like how is it? How is it working?
My understanding is Honda's completely reneged on their plans to pull out of F1 altogether, and they're just going to keep going with the full backing. As long as they don't go back to the old days of the Mugen backdoor shithouse donk that they used to run for Prost and so forth, but that's going back a while. But I think it's going to be the complete full Honda package.
Okay.
Looking forward to the bigger topics that we want to discuss tonight. The first of those is the sprint race. Now, there's obviously a question on the sprint race. There was a plan for 6 sprint races this season. They've potentially cut that back to 3. The big issue that comes into this is obviously the cost, the associated cost with the sprint race in terms of potential collateral damage to the cars if they're involved in the sprint race, and is the FIA going to allow for a budget increase, because there is obviously a budget cap on the teams for this season, and who's going to pay the extra bills? Tony, I'll throw to you first, and what's your thoughts?
How much money are we actually talking here? And so you said it's 6 races. I actually don't know which race.
6 races. They're gonna probably potentially throw about another 10 million at them.
And what's the budget cap now? I think it's 135.
Because potentially last year so potentially last year they threw another 25 mil at them and said, look, let's go and have some sprint races, whatever it costs. But this time they're going to really limit it, but they may drop, as I said, the 6 sprint races back to 3, and the big teams may not agree on them at all, and they may potentially just can sprint races altogether.
I think it depends where you sit on how you feel the sprint races went in 2021. So we only saw them for the first time in 2021. It was a new concept. It was to spice up the racing. It was to generate more, I suppose, more kind of a random type grid positions for the race on Sunday. I think it depends on whether we think it's actually worth sticking with that concept. Obviously, they think there's something in it because they're introducing 6 races again this year. But for me, I mean, it was good. It was interesting. It was fun. It was, it was exciting to see, a few swaps and changes. But, and it gave a bit of extra action when it came to Fridays and Saturdays, and the way that the whole weekend was put together. So you ended up basically having qualifying on a Friday, then the sprint race on a Saturday, and then the race on a Sunday. And as a Formula One fan, that's all you want to see is just cars constantly on the limit. For 3 days straight is brilliant, because let's face it, Friday practice is a bit boring. I find Friday practice it's good to watch. You know, if you've nothing else to do, you can kind of kick back and watch the cars going around the circuit, listen to a bit of commentary and that kind of thing. But it doesn't really give you any kind of excitement because you could go for 10 minutes and there'd be no cars on the track. So sprint races really definitely add something to the weekend. They spice things up. Is it worth them adding an extra 10 million to the budget cap to make these happen, or are we going to have enough excitement without having to do those sprint races, given that the new regulation changes with the car, the concept and the build, the chassis, and the aerodynamics? I don't think we need sprint races. Me personally, if they were gone, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. I don't think, but I think it just depends on as a fan where you prefer. Did you like them or did you not like them?
I wasn't a fan of it from the beginning. I thought it was like Sammy knows. You know, I used to watch with his grandmother when I was a child, and you know, I grew up just watching the normal weekend racing. And the first couple of sprint races I saw, I thought, no, it was just a complete joke. Yep, this is just bullshit. No, this is a complete mockery of the sport. Then we go to Brazil and we see the sprint race where Hamilton just absolutely blitzed it and went from, you know, just completely nailed it and thought, yep, cool, right, okay, this is a really good example of how a sprint race can work. So, Sammy, I'll throw to you now as one of our more junior fans of F1. What do you think of it as somebody who hasn't been watching F1 like me for 30-odd years? What do you think of sprint racing?
Oh, because you're my father, I heard some words of wisdom, but throughout the household. But I didn't like how it took away from Saturday. Was obviously qualifying got moved, but qualifying wasn't as crucial for the drivers as it usually is. If Max or Lewis were in second, it'd sort of buffer itself out due to their race pace. And that's all it was sort of based on. Qualifying for me was based on their race pace rather than their on the limit for one lap, which sort of took away from qualifying for me. But I really did like as Tony said, the mix match, like having Perez out on, I think it was Silverstone. He had a pretty bad sprint race. And so on Sunday, he had to whiz his way back up for some of those points. I love seeing that. The better cars back with the back markers, really getting some racing. It's pretty unfair with the Red Bull and the Williamses per se, but it's still racing. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it. But as Tony said, if it was gone, I'm not losing any sleep over it.
Okay, so the vote is I'm still 50-50 on sprint racing. Big T, for or against?
Against. Gimmicky.
No, it's a no from Tony. Sammy, for or against?
Just before we go on, just a question about the budget, the universal budget. If they have a crash, is that going to come out of that budget? Are they going to...
Well, that's what they're talking about. It may come out of an extra allocated budget just for sprint race damage rather than the allocated team cost budget that they're talking about for the nominated 23 races.
For me, I'm 50-50. I'm not for or against. Pushing towards no. I like my regular weekend, but yeah, 50-50.
Okay. Next topic to discuss is the Haas livery. They've come out with a potentially mocked up car with the Haas livery. My initial thought, well, one member, Xavier Copsiaftis, messaged me and said, "Is this bullshit?" And I said, "No, Xav, that's legit. That's the livery." Sammy, what's your thoughts on the? I'll throw to you first. What's your thoughts on the Haas livery? I mean, I can't see any change from last year. I mean, I realise that your Alkali, Nikita Mazepin's dad's a major sponsor of the company. He's thrown a shitload of coin into the joint.
Yeah.
Because Gene Haas has said to Gunther Steiner, "Look, I'm not going to back this forever. if it's a sinking boat, but they've got a huge Russian backing.
It might be it actually might be faster as a boat.
It might be. So, Samuel, I'll throw to you first. What's your thoughts on the potential Haas livery? I mean,
Well, I don't know. About a few weeks ago, everyone was slapping the 2021 liveries on the model of the 2022 car, and I opened my feed of Instagram and saw the car and genuinely thought it was just another person like slapping the old livery on the new car, but not much has changed. I do like how the front wing looks. You've got four parts to the wing, and each of those are a good colour, but other than that, it's pretty bland, pretty if not the same car to me as last year. But we'll see if they feel that reaction and change it up, but I doubt they will. I highly doubt they will.
I still think I can only hope Haas come back. I mean, they've had some good results over time. As a team, but I think they've just got to change the livery up a bit less white, do something different, just change it up a bit. That's what I don't know. Big T, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts, well, first of all, that's only a render. A lot of people thought that was actually the official car launch. They're only computer graphics put together by very talented people like the likes of Sean Bull, the likes of I can't think of the guy's name. He's actually in the Formula One experts group, but I was like Sammy, and you see these concepts coming out online, and you're checking your Instagram, your Twitter, your Reddit, or whatever you're on, and you see these concepts, and it's like, you have to kind of double check, like, is this actually the real concept? But to be in all honesty, I don't know what people were expecting, because at the end of the day, this regulation change is a year late. Okay, so this should have happened, but the pandemic changed everything, okay? Most teams had to line up their sponsors well in advance. So the major change for the car is, like Sammy said, it's the front wing, which looks really cool, really clean. It's lost all the barge boards, which has simplified the side look of the car. And that back wing without the end plates. I'll be honest, I think the actual look of the car is really nice. But I think when it comes to liveries, I don't know what people were expecting. The Mercedes is going to look the same. The Ferrari's definitely going to look the same. I mean, how many red Ferraris have we had? And every year it's like, I'm really disappointed that it doesn't have like the Marlboro branding down the side of it, or the barcode. It's like, guys, it's not gonna be too radical. I mean, even McLaren have hinted towards their livery. They've launched their team gear for 2022, and it's orange and black. There doesn't seem to be much of a blue in it, which might suggest maybe a small change. But the broad thing is, it's going to be that McLaren orange that we all know and love. So those people out there that are saying that the Haas is it's boring, it's shit, and I don't like it. This is bullshit. It's like, but what were you expecting? So that's where I sit on it. I'm not really expecting many changes in liveries this year.
That's such a good point.
I mean, but you've touched on one good point. The best part, I'm still going on about this, the best looking part of the 2022 cars is that rear wing. I just think it just looks shit hot. It's just sex on wheels, that rear wing, just the curvature of it, everything. It's just unreal.
It's like the Coke bottle, the Coke bottle-esque type of flow to a product, and it's kind of, you look at it from the rear end, and it's like, oh man, like wow. You can just imagine, those shots that are like really low down on the track, and let's say, let's pick a corner, let's pick like somewhere like Cops Corner in Silverstone, and that rear view shot of the cars just whipping around at 200 kilometers an hour. It's like, you can just imagine, with the suspension compressed into the ground, the floor practically touching you'll have the Venturi type, these vortices coming off the car and through the diffuser. It is just going to be them slow motion 4K type shots that we're going to see on a Sunday. I think it's just going to be incredible looking. It's some real F1 porn, if you ask me.
No, absolutely. The car looks, even though it is a render that you've told me that now, but it still looks amazing. The whole car looks amazing. So, very keen.
The next topic, George Russell. He's coming from a backmarket team being Williams, which looked like with the Williams car last year, looked like a milk bottle you'd pick up off the shelf, bottle of low-fat milk, the livery they had on it. But the team itself, with Jos Capito, he's come ex-VW World Rally Championship team boss. He's turned up. There's a different, obviously, over time there's been new ownership of Williams, but he has turned, I think, for all the years I've been watching F1, Jos Capito's turned Williams around a fair bit in terms of pointing them in the right direction a bit from where they've been going. They've got huge investment with Latifi's old man. He signed some big blank checks and just handed them over and said, look, put all the zeros you want on it to get the team turned around. But anyway, Jos Capito's the guy who is steering the team in the right direction. That aside, George Russell, he's off to Mercedes this year to be Lewis's number 2. Now, obviously, Lewis is, as of today's social media, he has
back.
Finally come back and said, look, I'm back. Wow, g'day everyone. Yeah, look, shit, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. You know, yes, I've moved the rock aside. I've been living in a cave. But anyway, yep, I'm back. So the question is, George Russell, what do you think he can really deliver? We saw him against Bottas in that one-off race when Hamilton was sidelined. What do you think he can really deliver against Lewis? Admittedly, they're going to build the car around him because they've got time to build the car around him to his frame. I've met George in Melbourne when he was in the Williams garage. He's as tall as me. I mean, I'm 186 centimetres. He's as tall as me. He's a tall guy, but he's about a third the size of me frame-wise. The point is, what's he going to deliver that's going to be better than Lewis in the equal, let's say equal machinery? Tony, your thoughts?
I think Bahrain, was it Bahrain 2020 or 2021?
2020.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah.
Like, he was able to go toe-to-toe with Bottas. He was able to drive that car as if he had been molded around it from day one. He's very much used to the Mercedes power unit and how it delivers the power and how to tune and how to map and how to get the best out of that. Even I suppose gearboxes, they would differ slightly between what Williams would use and Mercedes. I still think a lot of Mercedes' trickery is in their gearbox, and it's not been talked about, but I think their ratios are a lot different, that they're able just to pull away. I think George is going to be equal to Bottas at the absolute minimum, but I'm hoping that he's going to be a little bit better. I think if you were to draw a scale, I think and you put Hamilton at the top, I think it would just marginally be George Russell just below him, and then Bottas's level would be just behind George again. So I think he's so basically what I'm saying is he's a step up from Bottas, but he's not going to be quite a Hamilton, not just yet. He's going to need time with that car. He's got to spend time, setting up the suspension, getting the front wing the way he likes it. Whether he wants more bite or he wants a bit of more oversteer or understeer, depends on how he likes his car. He sits a lot higher in the cockpit as well. I don't know if you remember back when Nico Hulkenberg was, because he's quite a tall guy as well, and you'll always notice that his helmet
Hulk's
is also
tall guy,
almost kind of. Hulk's helmet was always kind of like always 2 inches into the airbox. Whereas if you look at front shots of Hamilton, he's way below it, so he sits a lot lower in the car. So that might have an effect on the balance of the car, you know, and the center of gravity. But it really, who knows? For all we know, Mercedes could be a midfield team this year. With these massive regulation changes, like, I mean, if anybody's been watching YouTube videos over the last week or two, Mercedes have openly come out and they've done this kind of, you know, James Allison was on and he was saying, like, you know, these regulation changes are the biggest changes in Formula One history. It's a complete redesign of the car from the ground up on every level. The power unit more or less staying the same. This is where Mercedes might have their advantage. But, like, how could we possibly predict what George Russell is going to do in that car when we don't even know how the cars are going to perform? So I'm not going to throw any predictions out there. I'm going to wait and see, but I don't think it's going to be as black and white as people think.
Well, Tony, that's the next topic, the predictions for this season. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Sammy, your thoughts on George Russell? You've seen him at Williams for a few seasons. How do you reckon he's going to go up against Lewis?
Yeah, similar to Tony.
I mean, admittedly, mate, he's one of the drivers you've seen in the few seasons you've been watching F1. I mean, when you and I went to Singapore a few years ago, he wasn't in F1 then, but since then he's been introduced to the circus that's F1. But what's your thoughts? How do you reckon he could go potentially against a fellow?
He's had a rough few seasons at Williams. Well, not rough. I genuinely reckon he's done a good job. He's done a good job at Williams, and Williams. I think Williams are looking good this season. We'll see how Albon goes, because he struggled in the Red Bull because of that. The rear was quite. He really struggled with his rear in the Red Bull, and I feel like the Williams for him is going to be something he's used to. So I feel positive for Williams, absolutely, but George was still pushing that car, and he got up there, especially this season. They've done very well for themselves, but with Mercedes and Lewis, I feel like Lewis is going to have the upper hand as the season plays out, and that's only because Lewis has been with that team for a decade now, and if he's going to have a problem with the car, he's going to know how to talk to that team and get that fixed for himself. Especially with the new regulations, then they're not going to have a perfect car at Bahrain this year. But I feel like Lewis is going to have the capability to turn that around quicker than George will at a new team. I think that's where the difference is going to come from. But I feel like George is really going to put up a fight though. But over the season, I'm backing Lewis.
So, Sammy, asking you for the young person's vote, do you reckon is George Russell in the chance with a couple of podiums, or do you think he could grab a potential maiden victory with the team this year?
Absolutely, because I can't really remember that stint with Bottas that well, but he got an overtake on him. Did he out qualify him? No, he was. I think he was a 10th down from Bottas in a car that he had been in for less than 6 hours. So if he's able to pull that out with Bottas, who was comfortable in that car by then, I'm sure he'll.
And had done several seasons with the team.
I think maiden victory for sure, and at least a few podiums, if not a few wins in there. Yeah,
are on the cards. Yeah,
if you look as well, I've just actually pulled up Wikipedia here. I've just pulled up George Russell's page, and you look at the kind of the career path that he's had. So he was blitzing people in karting, a lot like Hamilton. Okay, he then so we are looking at the BRDC Formula 4 Championship. He won it. He won that was in 2014. Then 2015, he finished sixth. He was doing 2 championships. Actually, 2014 as well. He was racing in Formula 4, Formula Renault 2.0, and the Eurocup Formula Renault 2.0. He finished, he's fourth or above in those championships. He went on to win the GP3 series first in 2017. He finished first in the Formula 2 championship in 2018. Then he entered into Formula 1, which he joined Williams, and he was finished 20th in 2019. He finished 18th in 2020, and he finished 15th in 2021. So, okay, he didn't enter Formula 1 quite the way Hamilton did, 2007, where he was, pretty much, he was only a point or two behind beating Raikkonen in 2007. He then went on to win it by 1 point in 2008 against Felipe Massa, and we all remember that race in Brazil. I mean, up in 8 against Felipe Massa, and we all remember that race in Brazil. I mean, up to the Formula 1 entry point, he's had a very, very similar career to Hamilton in the way that he's just kicked ass all the way through. So if George Russell had come into Formula 1 the way Hamilton entered Formula 1 straight into the McLaren team, which was already a top team. So if George Russell had entered in a Red Bull, or he'd entered in a who's the best of the rest? McLaren. Who's the best of the rest? McLaren.
2019.
Ferrari.
I'd say if
McLaren
they
is
popped
best
him
of the rest.
in a Ferrari, as they put Leclerc
Ferrari.
in there. If they had put George in instead of Leclerc back in 2019, I feel like if that's when Leclerc came in. But if they had done that, he would have absolutely been up there in that top 3, top 4, top 2 possibly. Yeah.
And we could be looking then at a very different George Russell right now, in that he would have had that pedigree with Ferrari, and would be ready for that seat then to take on Hamilton. So, I think if you look at George Russell, Charles Leclerc, you look at Max Verstappen. I want to call him Lando Norris, obviously being another one. The gamer crew. It's like the new gamers. The younger generation. I think George is up there. I think George is going to give Max. I think George is going to give Max a few headaches more than Hamilton. We're talking about how George is going to perform against Lewis. I think the real what potentially could play out in 2022 is that juggle between Max and George Russell. I've got a feeling Lewis is just going to run away with it. He's just going to go, I need that eighth title. He's just going to run away with it, and it's going to be George versus Max.
So I'll say one thing. So obviously, based on what you've said, Tony, George he's had more entries than Monday Night Lotto in races. Sammy, as a couple of drivers of your generation, Max versus George. If George can just, how do I say this? Just grab the bull by the horns. There's no pun there to Red Bull Racing, but if he can just, get his shit together, and do you think George can really give Max a headache?
Absolutely.
I don't know. What's your thought? I'm just asking you as the next generation of fans watching F1. As Tony and I watched like Prost and Senna 20 odd years ago, or 30 years ago. What's your thoughts? Do you see this as the next, in your view, as a 18-year-old fan of the sport, do you see this as, right, okay, this is going to be the next quarrelsome headache that we're used to watch?
And I sort of agree, Hamilton's he's been hibernating. He's going to be ready, and I think he wants that 8th. So and if he retires after this year, and if it's still that Mercedes Red Bull title contender, but it's absolutely going to be Russell and Verstappen. But this year it wasn't, for me at least, it really wasn't Mercedes v Red Bull. It was really only Max and Lewis. We sort of had Bottas and Perez. Obviously, Perez' new car was never going to be up there with them. You could have assumed that, but I feel like, as Tony said that Russell's really going to be really up there with almost helping his teammate out a bit more, if not being there for himself.
The thing that I don't get is, like, when my favourite driver of all time, Mika Hakkinen, was racing against Michael Schumacher, they were of equal age, equal experience. You know, obviously Michael Schumacher won a shitload more championships, but Michael Schumacher still stood there and said the greatest rival I've ever had was Mika, the gentleman driver, because Mika never once got the shit. And the thing I find the difference is, I mean, I'm going to be criticised for saying this comment, and people are going to say, oh, but, you know, you're not in Max's corner, you're not in Lewis's corner. But the thing is, there's about 15 years age difference between them. And that's what people tend to... Well, I'm not telling people how to... I'm not educating people, but there's a massive mindset in the difference between a 22 or 23-year-old and a guy's in his late 30s. There's no driver currently in F1 in their late 30s that's troubling Lewis. And there's no driver in their early 20s or early to mid-20s that's troubling Max. I mean, we're talking about a completely different generational gap here in driver experience, mindset, maturity, the whole shebang.
Aggression, you know. Does that kind of, you know, I wouldn't write off Lando Norris either. I think Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, I think, you know, we've said it there, even on the last episode 2 of the podcast about Carlos Sainz and how we think, you know, I mean, if you look at, and again, I mentioned it last episode as well, if you look at Formula 1.5, I know it's not an official championship, but it's basically Formula 1 with Mercedes and Red Bull removed. And you look at the best of the rest, Lando Norris won that championship, right? He gained enough points. He was far enough forward to be able to make gains.
Yeah.
Carlos Sainz very, very close behind him.
True.
So those two, and then now you're putting George Russell into that mix as well. So now for me, it's Max, it's George, it's Norris, it's Carlos Sainz, it's Charles Leclerc. I think Perez is too safe for me. He's kind to his tires. He's great to bring the car home, but he's not okay. I would say he's not an aggressive driver, and then Abu Dhabi happened, and then I kind of think, okay, where did that come from? Maybe we want to see more of that. Maybe he is, but he's not the gamer generation. I think I think this next, I think you're going to have the maturity of Hamilton out front, and then there's going to be this block of Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz.
I don't know. Chico's maybe the bloke that's in the second win of his career, or not second wind. He's on the second wind of his career, I should say. He's just finally got that mongrel in him to say, I can drive, I can succeed, I can, you know, push the car towards the front of the field.
Yeah.
Sammy, what's your thoughts?
See, even with Abu Dhabi, it wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't aggressive as Max can get. It was brilliant defending. I haven't seen that in, you know, since I've been watching, even, you could say. But that was amazing. But it still didn't have that aggressive, dangerous driving sort of feel about it. But yeah, no. I say to myself, if you took Red Bull and Mercedes out last year, it still would have been an amazing season, because, you know, it's Carlos, Charles, Norris, they're all really having a ball. They're really putting themselves out there. So if this regulation change can even the playing field, we're going to have an amazing season on our hands, because those two teams, McLaren and Ferrari, were really putting themselves out there, even just for third. But
to Tony and Sammy, I'll put you on the spot and say this: Do you think Vettel's done? Yes or no? Don't say anything more. Yes or no? Do you think Vettel's career is done? Time to No from Tony.
No.
Sammy.
I,
No, okay, 2
yeah,
no's.
I can't. He's a year younger than Hamilton, isn't he? But he's got that experience now. He knows what it takes to win as well. But if they can get that Aston Martin together, I feel like he can really put himself out there. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see where that car is this year.
Okay, good point. Good point. I would have said, yeah, maybe it's time to move on, but that's just me saying that just as a random thought.
Why do you say that? What is it about what Vettel has done? I mean, I don't know if you watched Race of Champions there yesterday. I only watched the highlights, but like Vettel was one of the only current Formula One drivers that actually made it to the quarterfinals. You know, and when it came down to it, it was the rally. Obviously, it was on snow and on ice this year, and it was Peter Solberg that came out on top in the end. But like Vettel and Mick Schumacher were able to take it right up close to the quarterfinal stages. So, you put these guys in equal machinery. Vettel can drive. But is he done yet? I don't think so. I think. Would you have the same argument about Alonso? So Alonso is a senior driver. He's there now. Not necessarily. He's not been brought into a team to win the championship. Vettel is in Aston Martin. Alonso is in Alpine. Really to develop the car to leverage off their experience and all the championships that they've won previously, the teams that they've been in, the engineers that they've worked with, where they've seen gains, where they can help develop the car around the driver. Yeah. That's what they're there for. I wouldn't say Vettel is done, but I can't see him winning another championship. But he's definitely podium worthy if everything comes like Sammy said, if Aston Martin pull everything together the way that they claim they're going to be doing. I don't think he's done yet, but I don't think he's going to be championship winning anytime soon.
Sammy, your thoughts?
Yeah, no. I agree with that completely. It is interesting. I would like to see. We saw it a bit with the experience for these new. They're not rookies, but they've got that youth. So experience over youth. It would be really interesting to see if these old guys could just kick it to the young guys, but we're not sort of seeing that. The teams are backing these youthful drivers just to see with that aggression what that can get out of a team. So yeah, I feel like Tony's right there with those experienced drivers now being brought in to sort of keep a team alive rather than win a world championship.
Okay. So based on that race of championships idea, it was talked about years ago in the group. We should, for one race, parachute Hamilton into a manor and then put, he's thinking, and then
manor.
Take Marcus Ericsson out of the caterer and put him in the Merc and, swap the drivers around a bit.
This is a fucking horrible conversation. You've mentioned Manor and Ericsson all in one sentence. Like
race, spoof 24th race for the championship, and it was a name out of a hat. You didn't know what seat you were going to end up in, as long as it wasn't your own team. So Lewis might get drawn his name out of the hat. Okay, right. You duck down to Red Bull. You go and sit in Max's car. Max may end up in the Alfa Romeo. Alonso, he could jump out of the Alpine. Right, you got to go and jump in Mazepin's Haas and do a 10-lap sprint race. If we're going to talk about sprint races again, do a 10-lap race in a car that is completely unknown to you. You get a session, say 5 laps to set it up, get used to it. So right, oh shit, this car's just a complete boat anchor. I can't drive this thing into anything other than a wall. Okay, right, I need this completely set up change. But then you go to start the race and you've got 10 laps in that car to drive to the best of your ability. Like a race of champions almost.
There was a Roman Grosjean joke in there somewhere about crashing cars into walls. But anyway, I like...
Yeah.
Do you know something? It's never going to happen, right? In reality, yeah, it's great. It's like what you just said there is like one of these dream la posts that you see on Facebook, and you just kind of scrolling and you quickly read and you go, oh, for fuck's sake, what are these people thinking? And you scroll on. No offense, right? But like, can you imagine? It's great to say that you're thinking about it one way, right? What if you put Hamilton in a slower car? But what happens with the guys like that draw that name out of the hat that gets... Can you imagine
I'd love to see
Nikita
it.
Mazepin
I
drawing
love
out
to see it.
Mercedes' Hamilton's number 44 chassis? Can you imagine? Like, there'd be no racing done. There'd be no racing done. He'd be there with his little notepad, like making notes about every little thing about the car and taking it back. Like, and then ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to have this standardization where the cars will all some way kind of level out, because the drivers would take that feedback back to the teams and be able to develop the car up, which is basically what we have this year. This is what Ross Brawn and Pat Simmons have done with the new design of these cars. They've standardized them in a way that there should be only a 1 to 1.5 second of a difference between P1 and P20. We discussed this last week. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what driver's in what car. They're all going to be pretty much the same. This is why, we were talking about it there earlier. We touched on it about you just won't be able to predict this season. You just won't. And I don't think putting drivers in other drivers' cars... It's as gimmicky as the sprint race for me, and I don't know, I can't. And from a competitive point of view, could you imagine Mercedes' reaction when they realize that a Ferrari driver, their competitor, is going to be driving their car?
You'd have to limit the amount of contact control.
Yeah, no.
Sammy, your thoughts?
Entertaining races
Sammy,
of the year,
how?
but
How?
yeah, it's too hard. And I feel like if you've got a close championship at that point, you put Max in Lewis's car this year, he would have put it in the wall and spent Mercedes some money. So also, we haven't even talked about fitting George in Yuki Tsunoda's seat. How's that going to happen? Like, they can't whip that up in a pit. Look, it'd be mighty entertaining, but yeah, I feel like
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yuki had been the footwell, but
Hilarious.
I feel like this year's the
Well said,
closest
Squeak.
we'll get to that dream with the
Brilliant.
that second 0.5 difference. Ideally, I feel like that's the closest we'll get to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Righto, gentlemen, final question for the night. The FIA CEO, the boss of the FIA, who should it be?
First of all, let's ask the question: why are they looking for a CEO?
So I'm only thinking in terms of race director. I think I'm not going to discuss. I'm only going to talk about Michael Massey as the current race director. I'm not going to talk about his potential disposure or his sidelining or whatever. But I think Charlie Whiting, when he was the race director of the Formula One races, he always had a deputy under him, and I think there maybe should be two deputies, one in terms of the actual technical stuff, there should be one for logistics, because remember a couple of years ago at Japan when most of the race got sidelined because of the inclement weather that was coming in. They were sidelined because they couldn't work out what time they were going to do most of the racing, and then the same guy has got to go and then work out the technical side of it. So do they need two deputies, one in charge of technical, one in charge of logistics, and whatever else you want to call it. The technical guy could be concentrating on what is going on within the grids and in the garages. The other guy could be more worried about what's going on behind the scenes for organising the actual racing event itself. Then the race director's still there to oversee the whole thing. Sammy, what's your thoughts?
In my opinion, I feel like you put someone else in that seat, it's still going to be as stressful as it was for Michael. It's still going to be problematic. But if you've got 2 or 3 guys under you, one's making sure all the marshals are safe before we take the safety car out. One bloke's making sure all the back markers have passed the safety car. You've got...
Do you know who that bloke is now? Do you know who that guy is who's responsible for Formula One, the FIA safety guy? Do you know who that is now?
Yeah, the Aussie guy.
It's Sam Michaels.
Yeah.
Do you remember Sam Michaels?
Yeah.
The Aussie guy that was working. He was sporting director at McLaren. So he's just been announced as the FIA safety director.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I reckon it should be just a job to maintain safety, and if more people are going to help out to do that, then absolutely keep that up.
I'm not speaking in defence of Michael Massey here, and I'm not talking in defence of what happened at the end of last year. I'm just talking about the position. I mean, you could put, Joe Bloggs in the position. Should the race director have 2 deputies?
Should the race director have 2 deputies? I'm not sure about that. I think what we were talking about is the CEO position, and this governance, this group, this governance that they're trying to put together. I think for me, I don't really particularly care who it is, as long as there is not a conflict of interest. One thing that we've seen over the last decade, and I think there's plenty in the people in the group would agree with me on this, if they're listening to the podcast. Jean Todt being the FIA president has thrown up so many controversial headlines when it came to things happening during the race that involved Ferrari. And in particular, I think one thing that jumps to mind was Oilgate. I don't know if you remember that from a few years back, where Ferrari seemingly had this second oil tank, and it was all deemed to be illegal, and it was all hushed and covered up, and it was quoted that that Jean Todt, because Jean Todt is ex-Ferrari and had so much success with Ferrari, and Ferrari will always have a big place in his heart. That there was favoritism there, and I think, look, whatever they do with the FIA, they need to be very careful and very strategic about who they bring in to perform these roles. Like Massey was handed a time bomb, well, not a time bomb, but he was handed, when Charlie Whiting sadly passed away, there was nobody else in the FIA that could possibly do Charlie's job, because it all happened all of a sudden. There was no one ever really that was lined up, in waiting to fulfill his position. So Massey was trying to do the best job that he possibly could, given how quick he was pushed into that role. And this all happened in one of the most electrifying seasons that we've ever seen in Formula One. So I sympathise for Massey. He's getting a lot of grief online, but I can tell you honestly, put any of you in that position, any of our listeners in that position, would you have done things differently? And it's hard to answer. I think Massey did the best job he possibly could, given the tools that he had and how quick he was pushed into that position. And he is inexperienced. He definitely is inexperienced in that. But when it comes to the roles and what we're talking about here in this new governance structure, for like what we talked about there, the Sam Michaels in this as part of as a safety director, he has experience firsthand in seeing his drivers crash, seen the damage and the financial costs done to the cars. There's marshals been hurt. We've seen marshals run out on track. and barely escape a Formula One car coming, because the communication lines broke down a little bit between the marshals on the side of the track and the FIA in the hub where they have the communication center. So bringing someone in with experience that's worked in that environment is key to that being effective. If we're talking about a CEO of FIA and how we're going to develop, rules and regulations and making sure that everybody's box checked into doing what they should be doing, it should not be someone, in my opinion, personally, I don't know if people would agree with me on this, maybe they could leave it in the comments, or, we could have a discussion about this separately in the group, but I believe it should not be anybody that's been previously associated with a Formula One team. That's my honest opinion. I think it should be someone that has governance experience, but brought in from the outside. It should not be someone that's previously been associated with any team, because favoritism is going to take place. You're going to have this uncompetitive, not uncompetitive, that's the wrong word I'm using, unfair advantage given to one person that's running a sport that's been previously tied to a McLaren.
All right, so let's bring back Flavio Briatore or Dave Richards.
Yeah. Can you imagine Flavio now heading up an FIA position in CEO? I mean, he's all about the fun in games. We talked about it in the last episode, and for people listening, you can go back to Spotify. You can find us on YouTube, and all your podcast platforms to find episode 2. But we talked about Flavio. Flavio's all about the entertainment. He's all, if it was up to him, he'd have sprinklers on the track. He'd have all the cars the same. He'd have everybody wearing banana hammocks, and it wouldn't be champagne they'd be spraying on the podium. It'd be something else, But he's not the person to be putting he's not the person to be putting in an FIA role. I mean, and given his track record with his I'd be careful what I say here.
He's got some lifestyle choices.
His unsavory criminal background. Let's put it that way.
All right. So the agreement is that maybe the FIA need a deputy CEO in charge of just Formula One. As I say that, folks, we're going to draw the curtains on this third episode of the F1 Armchair Experts podcast. I will say a big thank you to my partner in crime, Big T, and to our inaugural guest, Sammy. Thank you for joining us tonight, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I've loved it.
As you sit about three floors above me in our house here in Orange.
Yeah.
I'm in the laundry, you're in your bedroom. Thanks for joining us, mate. Appreciate it as our first guest. So if anyone else wants to be a guest, please feel free to email me, durko@f1armchairexperts.com, or just drop myself a message, and we'll get you on for the next podcast, probably after the first round of initial pre-season testing. But I think tonight's been a great topic. We've great podcast. We've covered off a lot of topics, and it's been some good discussion. So again, thank you to you, Big T, and to Sammy. I appreciate your input tonight, guys. And from there, I will say au revoir. And until next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.